Okay, let's get started. Is this too loud for people? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Joe Lombardo. I'm the coordinator of UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition, and I want to welcome you all to this conference here. We were actually a little concerned about doing a conference in Minneapolis. We knew it was a real progressive area with strong anti-war movement, that with a lot of folks that related to UNAC and the anti-imperialist message that we tried to bring to the anti-war movement, but we had never done a conference in the Midwest before, didn't know how it was going to go, didn't know how many people were going to register, didn't know how many people were going to come, but we got a huge registration. There'll be more people coming tonight, there'll be more people coming tomorrow, and I think we're going to have a wonderful conference. We organized this conference with meetings, not just of the leadership of UNAC, but of organizations that relate to UNAC and that we work with. And we had bi-weekly meetings building up to the conference, and then weekly meetings as we got closer. And I think that kind of democratic effort to put together the conference is really paying off and will pay off. Some of the key people who are here and who work to do it are Danica Katovich from Code Pink, Chris Mann from the Green Party Peace Action Committee, Cody Urban from Resist US-Led Wars and the International League for People's Struggle, Jeff Mackler, Margaret Kimberly, who I think was still on her way. There was an earthquake in New York. Chris Halali, many others. But the real heroes of organizing this were Sarah Flounders from the International Action Coalition, Sarah Martin from WHAM, Women Against Military Madness, and Wyatt Miller from the Minneapolis Anti-War Coalition. As I'm sure you're aware, the conference is happening at a pivotal time in world history. In Palestine, you know, we've witnessed, there have been genocides in the world before, but this one we have been witnessing on our TV screens, on our computers, on our phones. Despite the fact that the corporate media tries to hide the facts, it's been impossible. And millions of people around the world have come out to protest Israelis' genocide against the Palestinian people. The anti-war movement is being built as we speak around the world and in the United States. Zionism and imperialism have been exposed like never before and have been isolated like never before in the world. The US and Israel have voted virtually alone against a ceasefire. Even some of their allies could not do that. And they couldn't do it because their own populations are saying, enough, we are human beings, we can't allow this to happen. We can't allow our politicians to take the side of Israel. And so the United States and Israel have been very isolated. In the United Nations, they voted alone. But it's not just what's going on in Israel and Palestine today. The consciousness raising that has happened among the populations, the millions of people. Though I live in the United States, I've been in Britain for a while. They've held marches in London of 800,000 people. It's a country 1/6 the size of the United States. And at the same time, there were demonstrations in cities across that country. The police tried to give them leaflets to say, these are the chants you could do. You can't say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That became the major chant of the demonstrations. In Ukraine, the US and NATO are badly losing, creating a political and economic crisis throughout Europe and the United States. The world is changing. So it's an important time to hold this conference, to evaluate where we are, where our movement is, where we are going, and where do we need to go next. Today is also Al-Quds Day. There are demonstrations all around the world for Palestine today. Yesterday was NATO's 75th anniversary. They were formed in 1947. They will meet to celebrate their 75th anniversary in Washington, D.C. in July, and we will be there to meet them. Yesterday was also the date in 1967 that Martin Luther King gave his famous speech at Riverside Church on the Vietnam War, where he came out against the Vietnam War. 1 year later, in 1968, on yesterday's date, he was assassinated, probably for giving that speech. I think it was in 1918, on yesterday's date, in recognition of what that speech in Riverside Church, that the Black Alliance for Peace, a very important organization, a member of UNAC, was founded. And in a minute you'll hear their founder and one of their national leaders. So it is the right time to be holding this conference, and Minneapolis-St. Paul is clearly the right place. I hope this weekend you can meet new people, you can network, you could learn, you could teach, and you can get fired up for the important work that we all have ahead of us. I'm going to introduce next Ajamu Baraka, one of the central leaders and founders of the Black Alliance for Peace and a member of the UNAC Administrative Committee.
All power to the people. All power to the people. This call that we make is not a call just as an empty slogan, but it reflects a historic objective. It reflects the kind of objective we all have to strive for, because without power being residing with the people, we can't make any kind of changes. So we have to remind ourselves why we are here, why we in fact struggle. And so this evening, this is going to be sort of the beginning of a celebration, if you will. As Joe just indicated, we are here at a very historic moment. There's something different this evening than in any of the past UNAC conferences, in my opinion. Why? Because we are facing a situation that suggests to many of us that there's no turning back in terms of the intensification of the anti-imperialist movement here in this country. The fact that we have been imposed on, if you will, to be complicit to a certain extent in the barbarity, the savagery that we have witnessed in Gaza. It is a situation that is dehumanizing, but like most social processes, there's a contradictory element here. That is, it provides us an opportunity to ensure that people understand the true nature not only of Gaza and the savagery we see in Gaza, but also the true nature of the Western imperial project. That while the project has been able to give itself an era of respectability, using ideological instruments like humanitarian interventionism and the responsibility to protect. What Gaza has done, my friends, is to expose the true nature of this project. It has shown us that basically these forces are prepared to blow up the entire world in order to maintain their global hegemony. So what does that say for us? It means that we can no longer allow for innocence. We have a responsibility to lay out in clear, unequivocal terms what we're up against and to begin to advance a vision of what needs to be constructed. So we have to call out the enemy for what the enemy really is. We say in UNAC, we say in the Black Alliance for Peace, that what we are up against is a pan-European, colonial, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy, and it must be defeated. Now, we recognize that we have different tendencies here at UNAC, and that's a good thing. One of the things, though, we have to talk about, folks, is in terms of eliminating innocence, is for people to begin to understand and for us to articulate this, and that is that the enemy is not motivated just because of some kind of connection or some kind of commitment to evil. The enemy has a material objective, and that objective is to maintain global hegemony, to maintain objectively, if you will, white power. And so it's not about convincing these forces to do the right thing. It's understanding the motivations that are driving their policies. That's incredibly important, because when you understand that that is the objective, then you won't find yourself being diverted with all kinds of unimportant diversionary arguments as to how we change consciousness. We understand that material force can only be overthrown by material force, and that has to be understood. So my friends, this weekend, we need to discuss and to debate, but we also have to be absolutely honest in terms of what we're up against. If we're not able to organize ourselves and engage in more effective coordination, then we will find ourselves in a situation where we can not see the end of 2024. Now, that's not, in my opinion, a dramatic statement, in the sense that, we have to make sure people understand not only the complexity of the global moment, but the danger of this moment. That with the amateurs making policy in the U.S., with Anthony Blinken saying just a couple of days ago, once again, that Ukraine will be part of NATO, it's quite clear that these folks are driving policies that could very well end up in a nuclear confrontation, a nuclear confrontation that none of us are going to be able to survive. And so we have to be honest with the people. Again, we have to hope that people can understand, and we have to help them to understand the nature of this moment and what we have to do. So this evening, this weekend, we will discuss, we will debate, but even with all of the challenges that we are facing, we also want to remind ourselves that with the people organized, with power shifting from the enemy to the people, then there's always the possibility of success, always the possibility of human transformation. And that as revolutionaries, as anti-imperialists, our responsibility is to embody that positiveness, to advance the vision of what we can be, and to advance that vision with boldness and confidence. So my friends, thank you all for coming out this evening, coming out this weekend, and let's keep at the forefront of our awareness the historic responsibility we have going forward to not only win this short-term struggle, but win the struggle to transform ourselves and to transform our realities and to build a new world. All power to the people.
Well, we're going to hear from Nick Estes tonight, who is a leader of the Red Nation, author and activist, but he's stuck in Canada somewhere. So we're not going to hear from him tonight, but we're going to hear from a couple of other important speakers. We're going to have a panel of some of the organizers right here from the Twin Cities area, from the Palestine movement that have come together in a coalition. But before that, we're going to hear from two people, briefly from Remy Schuler, if you could come up, and Hussam Marajda. I don't know if I got their names correctly, who are going to explain to us a little bit about actions that are being planned, which this conference will be asked to endorse on our final plenary session at the two war parties, imperialist war parties in this country. They're known as the Democratic and Republican parties that will be holding conventions, and we're going to be there also. So.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Republicans have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Republicans have got to go. All right, sounds great. Thank you, everyone. And the Democrats, yeah. Oh, we'll get to that. So my name is Remy. I am the medic chair of the Coalition to March on the RNC 2024 and the outreach co-chair of the Milwaukee Anti-War Committee. So, show of hands, who here hates Republicans? This better be everybody. Who here hates Democrats? All right. Well, you're in luck because we are marching on both of them in Milwaukee and Chicago this year. So as most of you may know, the RNC is coming to Milwaukee on July 15th. And as you may also know, we at the Coalition to March on the RNC will be marching right up to their doorstep and let them know that they are not welcome in our city. The RNC committee and the city of Milwaukee are doing what they can to keep us far away from the convention, drafting a parade route with a speaking stage a half-mile away that the Milwaukee Police Department has full control over. We say, and I apologize if this isn't family friendly, fuck that. We demand our own permit to march on our own terms. Whose streets? Whose city? That's right. All right. Many, if not all of the organizations here have been fighting tooth and nail in support for the Palestinian resistance. As anti-war organizations, this has been the forefront of our work and will be until we see a free Palestine in our lifetime. Standing with Palestine is one of the central demands within the coalition, and if your organization stands with these demands, I better hear some noise. So here's our demands for the coalition to march on the RNC. Fight the racist and reactionary agenda of the Republican Party. Defend women and reproductive rights. Demand peace, justice, and equity for all. And stand with Palestine. In case you haven't seen the flyers around yet and haven't been bugged by me or other Milwaukee Anti-War Committee people, y'all may know we also have an anti-war contingent in development to bring the fight right to the most vile, reactionary elements of U.S. imperialism. In this contingent, we have our own list of demands. End U.S. aid to Israel. Down with U.S. warmongering. Sovereignty for indigenous nations. And planet over profit. We welcome all organizations attending this conference today to join the coalition to march on the RNC and join the anti-war contingent. Since we're in Minnesota, we would love to see a real show of solidarity from y'all. Come out in buses, fly out, pack your friends and comrades in a bus, and enjoy a nice scenic summertime Milwaukee with our terrible roads and a million bars. But seriously, I think I speak for everyone here from Milwaukee today when I say we would love to see each and every one of you out with us on July 15th to march against the RNC and the Republicans. If you're interested in joining, you can find me or other Milwaukee folks to sign up. There's a QR code on some anti-war contingent flyers, which you'll be seeing around. I'll be here all weekend, so you know where to find me. And then I'm going to end on just a couple of chants, as we like to do in Milwaukee. So, from Palestine to the Philippines, end the U.S. war machine. From Palestine to the Philippines. From Palestine to the Philippines. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hussam Marajda. I am the co-chair of the Chicago chapter of the United States Palestinian Community Network. I'm honored to be here speaking on the stage. I'm going to share with a lot of brilliant people this weekend. So thank you for inviting USPCN, and thank you for all you've done for Palestine in the past, I should say, not only 6 months. I know some of you have been around in the fight for decades. So thank you. Solidarity. RNC, Milwaukee, July 15th, and then we have the March on the DNC in Chicago on August 19th, okay? It's gonna be busy in the Midwest this summer. So we want you all to come out to both of these things. We want you all to come out August 19th to the DNC as well. In addition, next week in Chicago, we do have a one-day conference. One-day conference on Saturday. There's the card for it. So we have a bunch on the anti-war Minnesota committee table. But if you want one, you could also find me and I'll I'll give you one as well. So this card, please pick it up. This is for next week's conference. So if you can, come out to Chicago next week for this conference. That's going to be it's going to be talking about the march on the DNC. And it's going to be giving updates, and we're going to talk about our fights and our demands. Okay, so we have a slightly different struggle in Chicago. We did apply for a permit, and they denied us the permit. Shame. They're trying to give us an alternative route that is 4 miles away from United Center. Yes, and so we actually filed a federal lawsuit against them, against the city of Chicago. We have to make it clear to the Democrats that their bullshit is no longer accepted. It is, Biden didn't win because he was, he's great or smart. That's not the reason. Biden won because the movement put him there in 2020. The movement that showed up, back off the momentum of the uprising, the George Floyd uprising. That's why. And so they can't get away with this shit anymore. They can't get away with this. And so we're making it very clear. We're not voting for Biden this year. And we're gonna march on the DNC. And just to make it even more clear, people are gonna come out, if Biden loses, people are gonna come out and blame the Palestinians. The only people blamed if Biden loses are the Democrats and Biden themselves. We gotta come out strong for the RNC in July, and we gotta come out very strong, for the DNC in August as well. Will I see you there? Yes. We gotta see you there, okay? I'll see you there. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. I forgot to mention our demands. Palestine, at the top of it. Liberation for Palestine, from the river to the sea. Stop police crimes and community control of the police. Defend LGBTQ, women's and reproductive rights. Defend immigrant rights and demand legalization for all undocumented workers. Money for jobs, schools, healthcare, housing, and the environment, not for war. Support the right to unionize and strike. These are our demands.
Okay, you know what our agenda is for this summer. All around the country, the struggle of the Palestinian people, the heroic struggle against this genocide, the deaths that we have seen of children, of civilians, the horror that the entity known as Israel has imposed upon the Palestinian people, has moved the movement like never before. There's coalitions everywhere. I live in upstate New York, Albany, New York, a small place. There's now a huge coalition of all the different groups and individuals that we had never seen before in the movement coming together to fight all the time for the Palestinian people and against this genocide. UNAC puts out an email. We have an email list for New York City. Sometimes in New York City, there's 10 or 12 actions in a day for Palestine. Something happening at one college, groups taking over the train station, marching in the streets in the Bronx, all over. And some of those people are here that have been organizing that. There's a similar coalition in this area in the Twin Cities. And now, if those folks would like to come up, we're going to hear from members of the Twin City Free Palestine Coalition and doing a panel. So
Okay. Yeah. I'll just do it from up here. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea! Okay. Just wanted to ground us for a bit. Thank you to the Anti-War Committee for organizing this incredible conference. My name is Yasmin Hirsi. I'm an organizer in the Twin Cities and currently work with the Reviving Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment. I'm really grateful to be here with you all to continue to conspire and build movements that are rooted in ending the U.S.'s ruling class and its interest in maintaining its colonial power projects all over the world, including here, which must end now. To ground us a little bit about what the panel is going to be focusing on, the Free Palestine Coalition is an effort to mobilize the American public and pressure elected officials to demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, an end to U.S. military aid to Israel, a restoration of humanitarian aid, and an end to Israel's illegal siege on Gaza. Our coalition is led by Palestinians and believes that Palestinians do not have to do anything to deserve a long, peaceful life. Our demands are simple: immediate end to Israel's war and occupation, let Gaza live, end U.S. aid to Israel, end Minnesota investment in Israel's companies, weapons manufacturers, and Israel's bonds, and a right of return for all Palestinians. The coalition is made up of over 20 organizations at this point, and just to name a few, we have American Muslims for Palestine, National Lawyers Guild, Christmas Carolers for a Ceasefire, Jews Against Genocide, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Jewish Voice for Peace, Council American Islamic Relations, Climate Justice Committee, Freedom Road Socialist Org, U of M Flags JP, Educators for Justice in Palestine, Minnesota Abortion Action Committee, and the list goes on and on and on. Yes, incredible coalition of groups. We have all been brought together for Palestine and have emerged as a broad coalition that is behind a shared understanding that in the broader fight against exploitation of the working class, supporting the self-determination of all peoples oppressed around the world, and in ending the funding of state-sanctioned violence both here and in Israel by seeing a free Palestine, inshallah. By the demand of the Palestinian people, we as free people here in the United States, or the so-called United States, have an obligation to pressure the American government and make sure not another cent goes to arm Israel in its violent genocide against Palestinians. So with that, I am absolutely honored to introduce these fellow comrades on the panel who will share more about that work and the collective effort for a better, more just world and what that actually means. There will be an opportunity at the end for Q&A, so please hold on to those for the end. And then we will be breaking at 7:45 to break our fast for those that are fasting. So Meredith Abbey is a co-founder of the Minnesota Anti-War Committee, which is organizing a campaign to get the state of Minnesota to divest from companies that support apartheid state Israel. Anthony Taylor-Gougé is a member of the Minnesota Workers United, which is a group of rank and file union members and workers fighting for workers' rights. Humberto Martin with the Twin Cities is with the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice, which is an organization working on bringing community control of the police in Minneapolis. Dunya is the co-president of Students for Justice in Palestine at the University of Minnesota and has been involved in the Palestine movement since middle school. Gillian Rath is a member of the Twin Cities chapter of Students for a Democratic Society and has organized around a number of different grassroots campaigns, including a fight for a free Palestine. Latifah Moss is a member of the Minnesota Immigrants' Right Action Committee, which is a grassroots organization dedicated to equality for all aspects in life for immigrants, end of deportations and ICE detentions, and anti-immigrant laws. So please give a warm welcome to these incredible panel members, and I'll pass it off to Meredith to start us off.
How many of you are not from Minnesota? Will you raise your hand? Nice. Well, welcome to Minnesota. We're really excited to have you here. We're really excited to have this opportunity to be able to share some of the lessons that we have here locally in our Palestine work. We've been having, as the Free Palestine Coalition, a minimum of 1 protest per week since October 7th. On October 15th, we hit a mile marker of 15,000 people at our protest in Minneapolis, which is the largest Palestine action we've ever had in the Twin Cities. And it became the largest protest we had had since the uprising after the murder of George Floyd. And so this momentum caused us to form the Free Palestine Coalition, as Yasmin introduced, and it also got the attention of many members of the Minneapolis City Council who came out to multiple protests. And tonight I wanted to talk about our work to get a ceasefire resolution passed by the Minneapolis City Council and then the St. Paul City Council. And the person that would be the best person to speak about this is Sanaa Wazwaz, who's with American Muslims for Palestine, and unfortunately she had a Ramadan event tonight and can't be here. So I'm gonna do my best to be as awesome and as inspiring as Sanaa, and you'll just have to bear with me. So historically in Minnesota, we have targeted our senators, but after years of ignoring us and because the situation is so dire, we started expanding who we were willing to sort of like try to pressure. I mean, obviously the federal government has a great responsibility for this for what's going on, right? They could end U.S. aid to Israel today, right? They could stop sending weapons, but unfortunately, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith are super double not interested in doing anything. We've also, as the Anti-War Committee, been trying to pressure the State Board of Investment. There are 4 decision makers on the State Board of Investment: the governor, the attorney general, the state auditor, and the Secretary of State. And they have the ability to divest the state of Minnesota from Israeli bonds and from Israeli companies and from major weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, and they haven't done nothing. And we've been going to them for years. And Anthony is going to talk more about that campaign. But what we decided to do was to really look at, okay, we have a whole other level of government that we've never done this type of pressure work with, right? I've been doing foreign policy activism for 20 years, and I've never pressured the city council to do that, right? I've spent most of my career trying to pressure the Congress to do things. And so this gave us an opportunity because we were like, these people aren't listening to us. So we decided to join the national movement to try to persuade our city council to join with the other city councils across the country who had already signed on to ceasefire resolutions. And so our first battle that we realized is that in order to work on this campaign, we really needed to address the $25 million question, which is, why is Palestine a local issue? Because so often what we got told directly was, this is not a local issue. This is an issue you should be talking about with your senators. Please go away. And so we had to be like, no, we are not going away. This actually is a local issue. And so this is something that we had to work on. We had to talk about it in our call-in day actions, in our literature, in our speeches. But we really had to hammer home the idea that actually Palestine is a local issue. And we talked about it with people. We really hammered home the fact that like this is a local issue because we are paying for this genocidal massacre with our tax dollars, yep, at the national level, at the state level. And like we have always had this demand in the local peace movement, and I'm sure in your peace movements as well, say money for human needs and not for war. And it's like we've got real problems here in our country, but we're spending money killing people we've never met before. That's ridiculous. And so we got to talk about the trade-offs that are happening, about how we don't have money to pay for student loan debt. We don't have money to pay for our public schools, but we do have money to spend, killing people in other countries. And matter of fact, we should be having a real heart to heart. Is this really what we stand for as a country? And so we got to use this as a way to talk about the fact that we should instead be investing in our children and our healthcare and our housing. And particularly when we were campaigning in St. Paul, we talked about the roads. The roads in St. Paul are awful. I might be a Minneapolitan, so I can say that, but whatever. We also talked about the fact that this is a local issue because our community includes many Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims for whom this is a very real and personal issue. People in Minneapolis and St. Paul are concerned about their family members. And so to say that this is a foreign issue is to ignore the very diversity of Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's to say that we don't have Palestinians living in our own community, which is a bold-faced lie. That's not true. This is also a local issue because although I don't believe that we have actual weapons being made in Minnesota, we have weapons manufacturers that are open and do design work here in Minnesota, whether or not that's at General Dynamics in Bloomington, Lockheed Martin here in St. Paul, or we were just at Bay Systems in Maple Grove. But the fact is that our tax dollars repeatedly are being given away to these companies to build these buildings here, as happened at Bay Systems in Maple Grove and happened this just last year in St. Paul with Lockheed Martin. But the fact is that we are subsidizing these very weapons manufacturers that are killing people in Palestine. And so that is a local issue. And then lastly, it's important to look at the fact that hate crimes are rising across this country against Arab and Muslim people. And specifically, we've had multiple mosques in the Twin Cities that have been attacked and vandalized. And so it's important to say, look, you expect us to think that you're here to take care of our constituents. Well, these are your constituents. We have a large Muslim and Somali community here in the Twin Cities. You should be doing things to try to protect your constituents. And so and then our last argument was, you tell us that this is a federal issue. Well, the federal government isn't listening to us. And so therefore, you don't get to not listen to us too, because we know where you live, and we know where you work, and we know you, and you're gonna do this for us, and we're gonna make you do it. And so we did. We have some advantages as Minneapolis. First of all, we have a large and strong Somali population that is a key constituency in city politics, and they overwhelmingly support this issue. We had a member of our movement who is Muslim on the city council, and she listened to us, and she wrote city council resolution with us, and particularly wrote it with Sana Wazwaz from American Muslims for Palestine, and really took that idea of there should be Palestinian leadership on what this language should look like. We had the power of our movement. Literally, we've been having protests of thousands of people for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And so they knew we had a real base. They knew we had a real constituency of people that they needed to listen to. And lastly, one of the reasons why I wanted to organize this panel tonight is our coalition represents what Minneapolis looks like. We had immigrant rights groups, we had police brutality groups, we had student groups, we had various different Muslim groups, but we had all these different constituencies that look like Minneapolis that are part of our coalition to say, this is something that your constituents want, need, and are insisting upon you doing, and to do it now. There's some things that we're really proud of in the Free Palestine Coalition, and one is the language that we got passed. The first is that the resolution that was passed really starts with the historical context was 75 years ago. Our resolution does not start with October 7th, because this issue did not start with October 7th. This resolution refers to genocide in multiple places. It does not skirt around what is really going on. It calls it that this is a genocide that is happening, and we were pressured by the mayor's office, and we were pressured by other members of the city council to take that word out, and we won that battle and said, no, we are not pretending that this is not a genocide. Additionally, the resolution goes further than many other cities, and it calls for a full, immediate, and permanent ceasefire, and for an end to U.S. military funding to the state of Israel, and for the release of thousands of Palestinians held indefinitely without cause in Israeli military prisons. And I believe fundamentally we wouldn't have gotten that victory. And you know, many of you have done this work for decades, and the fact is we don't get many victories. We don't. We don't win very often in the anti-war movement. It's sad. But it's okay, because when we do win, we really get excited about it. And like, this was a victory for us, and we were really excited, but we wouldn't have gotten that passage, but we also wouldn't have gotten that wording if we wouldn't have had those protests of people. And so when people say to you, do protests matter? I like to tell them the story. Yes, they do matter, because politicians only do what we make them do, and they only do stuff for us if we show up and make them do it. So this passage created some momentum here in Minnesota. Other resolutions were passed in cities like Hastings and Columbia Heights and Moorhead, and relatively quickly after Minneapolis is passed. And so then we took our battle right here to literally across the street from this hotel to St. Paul City Hall. And St. Paul has an all-women city council, and they have championed themselves as being very progressive. And we were like, this is gonna work. We've got this momentum. We just got the best city council resolution passed in the whole country. This is gonna be a walk in the park. The city council president is Muslim and Iranian, and she's publicly stated that she's for a ceasefire. This is totally gonna work. Wow. We hit a wall. No, she was not down with helping us. As a matter of fact, she was a huge, big impediment to us passing it. And she blocked our efforts to pass it for a month with new excuses each time. It's not a local issue. We were prepped for that one. Then she said, there's a rule that we can't pass foreign policy resolutions. And then there was the whole, you don't have enough votes. And we were like, let's see. Let's have an actual vote. Let's have people go on the record. They didn't want to do that. But so then we had protests, we had call-in days, we were disrupting their meetings. I got to talk about how much I really felt about the issue when they were only having people speak about the zoo, the Coma Park Zoo. I then turned it into talking about, the prison, the Gaza is. But anyway, we disrupted their meetings and they weren't able to get things done. And so eventually they caved in and they passed unanimously a weak-ass resolution, but they passed one because they were like, you gotta go. We are tired of you here. So we won that one too. And now these resolution battles are happening at Northfield and in Duluth. And that brings me to my last point, which is, why do these campaigns for a ceasefire resolution matter? I've had many people say to me, these ceasefire resolutions are just symbolic. These ceasefire resolutions are just an opportunity to suck us into lobbying with politicians. And the fact of the matter is that this doesn't have to turn into a black hole of effort where you just spend your time in backroom conversations with politicians, because that's not how real change happens. Real change happens because you organize protests, because you organize momentum, because you organize people to put on that pressure. But these resolutions were very helpful for us in a couple of ways. One, it broke through the media silence about Palestine. After the first couple of months, the media was not interested in covering our street protests, regardless of how big they were. They had moved on, which is disgusting, because this is a genocide happening. I'm sorry that you don't think this is sexy enough for you, but for whatever reason, they found things like us occupying city council meetings and us arguing with city council members and us showing up with red paint on our hands. They thought that was photogenic and interesting, and so they covered it, and they let us use their newspapers as a platform by which to talk about what's going on in Palestine. They let us use their op-ed pages, where we got op-eds published that we've never been able to get published before. But they gave us news coverage in a way that they had ceased giving it to us. It also gave us an opportunity to talk about Palestine with people in a way that people felt accessible about. For example, I was watching my daughter's hockey game. I think I'm just watching hockey, but no, I'm getting an opportunity to have random people come up to me being like, Meredith, I see you're working on that ceasefire. Will you please explain that to me? And so that's great. I know a lot more about Palestine than I do about what constitutes a call for hockey, even though I've been watching it for like a long time. I still don't understand. That all looks like you just beat the crap out of this other kid. I don't understand why that's a call and that's not a call, but I can totally talk to you about why this is an important issue. And I had conversations with moms while watching hockey games that then turned into phone calls that they made, and it gave them an opportunity to be able to ask a question. And I think it's because we weren't talking about a conflict that was somewhere else. We were talking about an issue that their own city council, that our own city council was addressing, and it gave them an opening by which to ask questions that they really wanted to ask. And I think that's what's important, is that we need to move people forward. And this resolution battle gave us an opportunity to do that. And then also, this resolution battle, because we kept tying it to, why is this a local issue, it gave us the opportunity to talk about how our tax dollars are being spent. And I fundamentally do not believe that Americans want their taxpayer dollars to be spent killing children and having them fall under giant buildings of rubble and then be left there. I don't believe that that's what people want to do. I only believe that people let that happen because they are fundamentally ignorant. I don't think that people understand that their taxpayer dollars are paying for those bombs. And so this campaign gave us a way to raise the level of political awareness in this city, and that is fundamentally important and crucial to this battle for a free Palestine, because Americans must understand that they need to look in the mirror. That they need to look in the mirror and see the fact that they are responsible, that we have blood on our hands because our government is doing this, and we have a fundamental responsibility to say no. And this resolution battle gave us a vehicle by which to do that. And so now Minneapolis has joined with more than 100 cities that have passed ceasefire resolutions. These cities include places like Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta, Detroit, Seattle. And what's important to understand is that all of these cities are essential for a Democrat to get elected president. Uh-oh. This momentum was followed up by the uncommitted primary movement, and the Biden administration and his campaign are terrified that they are going to lose as a result of their unconditional support for Israel's genocide. And we need to keep up this momentum between now and August because we need to win. We have a responsibility to keep speaking out. We have a responsibility to keep protesting. And I hope that this weekend will be inspiring for you so that you can go home and keep up protesting and keep those chants going. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony next.
Hello. So first, I want to say, my friend and comrade Nick Estes unfortunately wasn't able to be here tonight, so we weren't able to see a really incredible panel that was going to happen on decolonization. But it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention that where this conference is taking place is in occupied Dakota territory. Before this state was granted statehood, before this territory was called Minnesota, through unceded and stolen land cessions and coerced treaties, this land was called Minnesota Makoche, which means where the land reflects the sky, or where the water reflects the sky. And that's based on this river that is right here behind us. So I just wanted to mention that before I got into my speech, because I'm sure Nick would have done that a million times better. But my name is Anthony, and I'm a member of Minnesota Workers United. We're a group of rank-and-file union members, workers, and community members united in the fight for workers' rights through the lens of class struggle unionism. I'm a proud rank-and-file union member of United Food and Commercial Workers, otherwise known as UFCW, Local 663. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the importance of labor solidarity with the struggle for Palestinian liberation, and also the work we have done in Minnesota Workers United and within the Free Palestine Coalition, and our campaign around the Minnesota State Board of Investment. But I'm going to do something a little bit differently first. So I want to talk about class struggle unionism and what that means for work around Palestine. So workers come as they are, and they come in their own experiences that shape them. In my workplace, for example, there are at least 4 commonly spoken first languages. I work alongside small-town transplants from North Dakota. Some of my fellow coworkers are trans. Some of them are immigrants from Ethiopia, Somalia, Mexico. Some of my coworkers are Muslim. Some are queer. They're all of those things, and they're also a lot more than just those things. But all of those things and all of those differences make up the working class. So when we say immigrant rights or trans rights or free Palestine, these are all rallying cries of the working class. My own experiences, for example, affect how I engage in organizing as a unionist and as an anti-war activist. My grandmother was born on the Menominee Indian Reservation. My grandfather was born on the Lakota Reservation. I grew up on the south side of Minneapolis, which has the largest urban Indian population in the country. And because of that, I grew up proud to be Native. And those things all affect how I engage with this work. And because of that, I'm honored to be on this stage at the UNAC conference, where the theme of the weekend is decolonization and the fight against imperialism. So members of Minnesota Workers United, just like countless other workers around the city, state, and country, have organized within their unions to pass ceasefire resolutions and call for divestment. The ability to pass resolutions may not always wield the type of political power that we want them to, but these resolutions force workers to engage in what is happening in Palestine, and often it's for the first time in their lives. It shows that labor can still stand for something more than just ourselves. As Minnesota Workers United and members of the Free Palestine Coalition, we have shown ourselves as rank-and-file unionists to proudly wave the banner of labor for Palestine when we're in the streets every single week with the Free Palestine Coalition. As workers, we have our own power that we utilize to engage fellow workers on the shop floor. I work in a grocery store, meaning my job is public-facing. Just this past fall, we went through a rigorous contract struggle, which culminated with us taking a strike authorization vote and having the highest authorization vote in our local's history. But because of that collective power that we wielded as workers, we told the boss that we'd had enough and we were willing to go on strike. We eventually won the highest guaranteed wages in the country of any cooperative grocery store. But what we built through relentless organizing wasn't just wages and a better contract. What we really built was power, and a belief that organized power means that we can win. Through collective power in our workplace, we've built a lot. We've ingrained in workers this idea that organization means something. Even in small acts, we understand that we're planting seeds everywhere that we go. Around half of the workers in my workplace are wearing big buttons on their chest that read UFCW for a free Palestine, one which I'm wearing right now. We have buttons that say labor for Palestine. We have buttons that say free Palestine. And we do this in a front-facing job where we are engaging with hundreds of people a day. And while this may not seem like a lot, we are doing it as a small act in an attempt to plant seeds amongst the public. But as an anti-war activist and a labor organizer, I can tell you that what is happening is that we're also planting seeds within the rank and file. We're engaging workers in the movement to free Palestine and engaging them to mobilize around Palestine. And as I'm sure most of you in here know, with mobilization also comes organization. We bring workers into organization around Palestine by planting these seeds with the goal that some of them will blossom into dedicated anti-imperialists, that fight for Palestine until Palestine is finally free. So I want to move on to what Meredith had touched on with the State Board of Investment campaign and the work that we've done in the Free Palestine Coalition. MWU has been a proud member of the Free Palestine Coalition since it was founded last year. The Free Palestine Coalition has engaged in all sorts of different work involving the ongoing genocide in Gaza, but one of the primary campaigns that we've been involved in is divestment at the state level, specifically organizing around the Minnesota State Board of Investments. The SBI manages investments with taxpayer money, and returns on those investments feed the pension system in the state of Minnesota. The SBI has invested over $500 million of public funds into Israeli bonds, banks, and weapons manufacturers. All in all, the incredible research done by activists here locally, many of whom are in this room, and I think over at that table over there are a lot of them, they've calculated that the Minnesota State Board of Investment has invested somewhere around $3.2 billion in corporations that are complicit in the settler colonial state of Israel. Shame. Minnesota Workers United has organized Palestine and SBI educational events geared specifically towards workers and unionists that have their public pensions invested in Israeli apartheid and genocide. We have engaged workers in a way that shows that the occupation of Palestine and the ongoing genocide is not a complicated issue. We have drawn direct lines to show workers how our money is funding the horrors we are witnessing in Gaza. But we haven't stopped at education. As organizers, the Free Palestine Coalition has worked to mobilize workers whose pensions are invested in the state of Israel. In February, we packed the SBI meeting. Activists and public sector union workers alike spoke at the quarterly SBI meeting at the Capitol and demanded that the SBI divest all of these public funds from any company complicit in Israeli apartheid and genocide. Also, after public comment was over, we ended their meeting by chanting them all out of the room. But this work didn't start in February. The coalition is predicated on a group of organizations that have been doing this work for many years, and in some cases, for decades. SBI divestment has been an ongoing campaign for organizations like the Anti-War Committee for years. And because organizations like the Anti-War Committee, the BDS community, and others have been on the front lines of this campaign long before October, it allowed them to step up and effectively mobilize people around this campaign and Palestine. We've also gone after the actors who are responsible for these investments. The State Board of Investment has only 4 decision makers. The board members are Governor Tim Walz. That boo was not loud enough. State Auditor Julie Blaha. Secretary of State Steve Simon. And the last one is really disappointing. A man who sat on a stage with the late, great Kwame Ture, Attorney General Keith Ellison. Yes, we've organized call-in campaigns and teach-ins, but we also believe that real change happens on the ground and in the streets. And that's why we've taken the fight directly to Governor Walz. The Free Palestine Coalition has led a number of marches and protests to his current backup mansion in St. Paul. Yes, he has 2. We've brought thousands of people to surround his house and show him that Minnesotans have had enough. And we've demanded his complicity in genocide and now. On the eve of the SBI meeting in February, 14 people involved with the Free Palestine Coalition were arrested in an act of civil disobedience by occupying the property of Tim Walz's backup mansion. We know that our fight is not over until Palestine is free, but there are direct ways to tie local and state-level politics to the genocide in Gaza. It is imperative that as we sit in the belly of the beast, We attack the beast from within it and at every level. And that means engaging the people where they're at, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our unions, and connecting all of our struggles together. If you live in another state, do some research. Try to establish what your local financial ties are to settler colonialism and genocide in Israel. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to do a little chant just to get the energy up, if that's okay. Okay. Bloody Blinken Genocide Joe.
Bloody Blinken Genocide Joe.
All of you have got to go.
All of you have got to go.
Bloody Blinken Genocide Joe.
Bloody Blinken Genocide Joe.
All of you have got to go.
All of you have got to go.
Thanks for entertaining that. Next up, I'd love to introduce to the stage Dunia, who's with Students for Justice in Palestine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It is so beautiful and such an honor for me as a Palestinian from Gaza to see so many people involved in the Palestinian movement and fighting for our liberation. My name is Dunya, and I am the co-president of Students for Justice in Palestine at the University of Minnesota. I've been organizing with SJP since my freshman year in 2020, and throughout these years, I've been so honored to represent Palestine and to continue raising awareness for Palestinian liberation and self-determination. And I'm also the representative of our group within the Minnesota Free Palestine Coalition, and I'm so proud to see how this coalition has been able to mobilize and organize for Palestine, especially in the past 6 months, and how powerful and such a powerful force the coalition has been, not only in Minnesota, but also throughout the nation. Our group, SJP, has been organizing and raising awareness for Palestine far before the most recent genocide in Gaza. We started as a student group in 2014, and we have been mobilizing and growing our organization since then. We are involved in many events and actions, including marches, rallies, protests, teach-ins, campaigns, and throughout the Free Palestine Coalition, these past few 6 months, we've been more active in events and actions like bannerings, protests, disruptions, indirectly and directly, and all these educational events centered around Palestine. One of the most powerful campaigns that we started on the University of Minnesota campus has been our divestment campaign called UMN Divest. In 2016, SJP and other grassroots activists and organizations launched UMN Divest with a focus on 3 platforms: Palestine, indigenous sovereignty, and the prison industrial complex. And throughout 2016 up until 2018, SJP really focused on building their base on the U of M campus. And they collected thousands of signatures for students who were supporting the call to have a referendum on the U of M polls that address a divestment from companies or entities who are in violation of human rights and are infringing on indigenous sovereignty. So in 2016, they passed this petition to collect and build their base so that when in 2018, when they got a question about divestment on the campus election polls, they would have thousands of students come out and support them. And in 2018, we published a referendum question on the campus election polls in which students voted whether they wanted the University of Minnesota to divest from companies that are complicit in Israeli violations of Palestinian human rights, companies or entities that are maintaining and establishing private prisons and immigration detention centers, and companies or entities that are violating indigenous sovereignty. And this question passed by 3,392 votes. It was such a historic and powerful movement and demonstration on our campus, and it was actually a very, very close call. The Vote No campaign against our divestment question and the Zionist student groups, they came in very close, and we won only by 200 votes. We still rose victorious despite the propaganda and the campaign against us. The Zionist students would organize and table on campus, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying food and making students vote no against our divestment campaign in exchange for food. That's how they were able to collect 3,000 votes. And the Students for Justice in Palestine group were only allocated $500 to campaign, but we still rose victorious. And it's unfortunate because even though we went through this democratic process of, demonstrating how many students really want divestment, and we made history on the U of M campus, the University of Minnesota administration refused to acknowledge our demands. They refused the demands that we outlined in this referendum, and they continued to ignore us for the next few years. So this brings us kind of into 2021, when the violence in Sheikh Jarrah there was huge violence in Sheikh Jarrah, where the Israeli government ruled to evict Palestinians from their homes and replace them with illegal Israeli settlements. And SJP protested. We went out in the streets and on campus, and we protested this violence and this forced displacement and the killing of over 230 Palestinians in occupied Palestine and in Gaza. And it was really a moment to demonstrate how urgent divestment was in that moment, and to also reaffirm our calls for divestment from apartheid Israel. But the only thing we got in 2021 in response to these protests and this rage and anger that we were feeling was emails from the president at the time, Joan Gable, talking about the rise of anti-Semitism and violence on campus. Shame. Of course, this was extremely disheartening and frustrating for our group, and it really demonstrated the discrepancy in treatment between Palestinian and non-Palestinian students. Not only did we feel ignored, but we felt that we were unworthy of a response from our own university. Throughout these years, we can see how the discrimination from the University of Minnesota has been towards us, and their actions further raise concerns for their complicity in the dehumanization and violence against Palestinians. So since 2021, we've been protesting, raising awareness for Palestine, this leads us into 2023 and 2024. And in a response to the ongoing Gaza genocide, we formed a coalition on campus called the Coalition for Palestine. This coalition consists of SJP, SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, and YDSA, Young Democratic Socialists of America. And one of the projects that we are most interested in launching on our campus has been the divestment campaign, similar to the one back in 2016 and 2018. So in the beginning of this year, the fall semester, our coalition really focused on building our base. We reached out to many professors, faculty, and staff and asked about their capacity and how willing they were to support our campaign. We also worked with a lot of student organizations, and we thought it was very important that we raise awareness about the interconnectedness of different Native liberation struggles. And we even held an indigenous solidarity event where we included the Armenian students, the Chicana Studies group, BSU, and it was really a moment to demonstrate how all of these histories and all of these liberation movements have very similar aspirations for self-determination and sovereignty, just as the Palestinian cause does. So during those few months, we really did a lot of research on the university's investments. We're doing a lot of networking with student organizations, the student body, and professors, and we tried to build a strong, supportive base on campus so that when we go into our to the campus election polls, we have thousands of students that support us, that know about Palestine, are aware of the ongoing genocide and how the University of Minnesota is invested in millions of dollars that support and abet the Israeli regime. So on March 27th, the results of our referendum were published, and students overwhelmingly voted in favor for divestment. We had over 4,000 students vote yes for divestment. We had only 800 people voted no against divestment, and yes, boo. And 500 chose to abstain. But despite that, it was such a huge victory for the coalition, and especially for Palestinian students who have been organizing in the movement way before October 7th. Although we celebrate the victory, we also need to recognize the suppression and the propaganda that went into our campaign. There were thousands of dollars poured into the Vote No campaign. Zionist students and their groups went around driving a truck that displayed propaganda about Hamas raping women and beheading babies. They also hung up flyers around campus talking about that same propaganda and to vote no on our question number 2. You know, the funny thing is, about all the thousands of dollars they poured into their Zionist propaganda, when they went around with those trucks and they went around with those flyers, they failed to put up a QR code or a link, at least, for students to go vote no. So they had all this propaganda, but none of those students could actually take action and to scan a QR code and to vote no on the campus election polls. So it was hilarious to see this propaganda, and it actually worked in our favor that they didn't have those QR codes or the campus election poll link. But we are very proud of our victory on campus, and really, this moment demonstrates that despite the suppression and the propaganda used against us, we still rose. We were able to campaign every day around campus. I remember I was campaigning, like literally in the bathroom, harassing people and being annoying about it. But I have family in Gaza. I have 12 members of my family that were killed. Divestment is an important issue to me, and I don't care how annoying I was. I needed students to vote no. Voted yes for divestment. We're very proud of how we've been able to build such a huge solidarity movement on our campus. Many students and student organizations have worked with us and have brought Palestine into their spaces and have made educational events about Palestine and taught about Palestine, and it shows that the University of Minnesota, when they go and vote against this referendum, that they are not only impacting Palestinian students and the Students for Justice in Palestine group, they are now up against over 20 organizations on campus, student organizations that are supporting and standing in solidarity with our movement. So when they go address and ignore us, they are not ignoring only Palestinians, they are ignoring 20 organizations and thousands of students who are supporting Palestine and who know just how complicit the University of Minnesota now is with the ongoing genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians that has occurred over the past 100 years. And I want to again demonstrate how powerful our referendum was from 2018, where we only won by 200 votes, to now where only 800 students voted against divestment. This is just a testament to how support for Israel is declining every single day. And our results is a testament to that fact. Now that we've, got these student signatures and these votes, and we won this victory, we all know that this is not where our work ends. Our work for Palestine goes past this, and we are continuously working to get the University of Minnesota to acknowledge our historic vote. They have yet to acknowledge it, and I'm sure they will ignore our calls for divestment as they have in the past years. But we will take our resolution and our referendum to the Student Senate, and we will take it to the Board of Regents, and we will demand divestment, and the thousands of students that voted with us in support of divestment will back us up, and the faculty and the professors and the staff that we have joined our movement will support us and will stand in solidarity with us when we take this question and this referendum to the Board of Regents and to the University of Minnesota administration. And they will no longer be able to ignore us, especially in this historic moment where over 40,000 Palestinians have been murdered at the hands of the Israeli regime. And our institutions like the University of Minnesota are directly complicit in the murder of our families and our people. That is just a little bit about what the work we have been doing on campus, and we will continue to go after the Board of Regents and the administration. And I will end by saying, long live the resistance, glory to our martyrs, glory to Palestinians, glory to the Palestinian resistance, glory to the Palestinian movement, free, free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dunia. Up next, I'd like to introduce Gillian Rath, who's a member of the Twin Cities chapter of Students for Democratic Society.
I just want to start by saying it has been such a pleasure to be able to organize with SJP and with Donia specifically. We are so lucky that here at the University of Minnesota that we have such strong Palestinian leadership to guide us, so thank you for that. But I am Gillian. I'm a member of the Twin Cities chapter of Students for Democratic Society, and I'm also one of the SDS representatives in the Free Palestine Coalition, and have been organizing with them since its conception in early November. Since October 7th, SDS has been boots on the ground, as I'm sure most of us doing anti-imperialist organizing also have been. We officially switched our campaign to focus on a free Palestine in October, specifically demanding the university to divest. As Donya explained, SDS helped form and join the University of Minnesota Divest Coalition. And since our big win with the referendum vote, we have not received any acknowledgement from the administration. We're trying to use this momentum that we have right now and continue to try to get admin to listen to our demands. And we have great leverage. But currently, we're trying to get the undergrad student government to try to pass a divestment resolution similar to the one on the ballot, because that will give us a push to the Board of Regents, and by going through the proper channels, we will have an even greater chance of the Board of Regents divesting. But we are not letting this replace our actions in the streets and our movement building work, because we know that this is a necessary route to take in our campaign. And other universities across the country are actually divesting, like University of California, Davis and Brown. So we see this as a realistic and tangible goal. But looking back on our broader fight for divestment, SDS has been organizing lots of actions and events on campus. We have had several rallies and die-ins on campus that have been very well attended, even in the freezing cold. Many of our actions have targeted companies on campus that support Israel. For example, we have projected messages onto Starbucks and McDonald's saying things like "Free Palestine" or "Kids' meals for kid killers." We have participated in several national walkouts for Palestine, which has been a really good way for us to show solidarity with other activists. We have done bannerings around campus, and my personal favorite, we have disrupted the Board of Regents meetings. This is a fantastic way to speak to them directly. And we have distributed materials that include our demands. We have shown up with bloody hands, and we have even been threatened with arrest at these meetings. It is clear that they don't want us doing this work, and they do not want to listen. But this, for us, is all the more reason to keep fighting. Over the past 2 semesters, we have mobilized hundreds of students. And we are so disheartened that we have had to put so much work into protesting an ongoing genocide and the ethnic cleansing of an entire group of people. But what this has taught us is that our movement is strong and that it will continue to grow. But despite the support from the majority of students on campus, shown by our election results, we have faced an enormous amount of political repression on campus. Political repression is attacks on activists, organizers, and movements, led by the police, courts, higher government bodies. It is intended to kill the movement by taking down its leaders. And it can take many forms, and it's something that we've become all too familiar with lately in the fight for a free Palestine. SDS has a long history of political repression, but our chapter has been experiencing it at an escalated level ever since we started doing Palestine work. Currently, we've been put on probation. The official reason that we've been given is that we've violated the university's flyering policies by hanging up flyers where we weren't authorized. And for those of you who haven't been on a college campus in a while, there are flyers hanging up literally everywhere. And every student group hangs up flyers in the bathrooms, at bus stops, and other places that are unauthorized. But do you think that these student groups that aren't speaking out about Palestine are getting reprimanded the way that we are? We know that this is not really about hanging up flyers. The U of M administration has been attacking Palestine activism every which way they can. Faculty are getting their jobs threatened. Other professors, students, and groups on campus are putting in so much energy and resources to try to tear down the pro-Palestine movement. And I also want to add that this probation came at a suspicious time. Immediately after we held a disruptive die-in in the middle of the Student Union building to bring attention to the loss of life happening in Gaza. Supposedly, though, this action had nothing to do with our probation. So we have been running in circles, attending meeting after meeting, sending email after email, trying to defend ourselves and figure out what ground the university has. And so we filed a Freedom of Information request to find out specifically what the university stated as our reason for probation. And we found that someone had anonymously reported our posters for being anti-Semitic because they said "from the river to the sea." This is absolutely disgusting. And I'm sure every single one of us here who has been doing Palestine work is well familiar with this accusation of anti-Semitism. And this is not only people not understanding the fight for free Palestine and not understanding the relationship between Zionism and Judaism, but it is also an attempt to delegitimize our movement. SDS is an organization that knows how to combat political repression in its many forms, which is why we are not afraid to keep getting out in the streets. We have demonstrated this time after time. For example, we freed the Tampa Five. We freed them through grassroots political organizing. And since this recent probation at the University of Minnesota, we have only just been more active. They want us to stop holding actions on campus, and they want us to stop being disruptive. But actually, we have gotten even more involved, and we have held an action almost every single week since then. Political repression will not stop us. And if anything, it gives us a drive to work even harder. And we will be out in the streets with all of you, and we will be out in the streets with the rest of the Free Palestine Coalition until Palestine is free from the river to the sea. And so I want to end with the classic SDS chant. When I say dare to struggle, you say dare to win. Dare to struggle. Dare to struggle. Dare to struggle. Thank you.
Give it up for Gillian. Thank you so much. Up next, I would like to welcome Latifah Moss, who's a member of the Minnesota Immigrants' Right Action Committee. Welcome her, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Latifah Moss, and I am a member of the MIRAC, which is the Minnesota Immigrants' Rights Action Committee. We are a grassroots organization that believes in equality in all aspects of life, end of ICE detentions and deportations, and legalization for all. Last year, we were actually able to support and work with another coalition to pass driver's license for all here in Minnesota. MIRAC stands in solidarity with those in Palestine and Gaza and those who recognize and are willing and are fighting for their liberation. In our work within MIRAC, we've seen a lot of growing anti-immigrant laws being pushed and introduced over the years. This week alone, we saw Iowa and Idaho work to push bills to allow police to work as ICE agents in their own states. Also this last year, I was able to take part in the delegation. We've had MIRAC members take part in 2 delegations over the last year. Last April, actually, down to the Tijuana border. There we saw Elbit Systems surveilling this massive 30-foot wall at the Tijuana border, and that also always ties back to how the same way Elbit Systems that the SBI continues to support here in Minnesota, the same Elbit Systems being used in Palestine, and that liberating Palestine is the start of liberating us all. We know that the U.S. is and has still been actively displacing people in many countries for capital gain and power. We see Democratic and Republicans use their anti-immigrant rhetoric and denial of their responsibility in these acts. We've seen numerous countries denounce Israel for their genocide of Palestinians, and the U.S. continued to support and provide endless support and aid in the same breath, but also offer humanitarian aid. We've watched with our own eyes that both parties that genocide is still somehow not enough for them to do what's right here in supporting and ending the regime of Israel. I really do want to thank the Free Palestine Coalition for showing up every week endlessly. Like many of us have said, we continue to see growth of numbers. I have not seen this many people out on the streets since the uprising, since the murder of George Floyd. It is whether we are packing a school board meeting, or we're packing the streets, or we're packing representatives' offices, and we're always taking part. So I do want to thank everyone for continuing to do that, and again, proving that community always shows up for community to do what's right. And I do believe that this coalition is that representation of that. One last plug, kind of a shameless plug for MIRAC. We are marching for International Workers' Day on May 1st here in Minneapolis. So those are local or maybe not so local, but want to continue to support, we will be on the other side of the river here in Minneapolis on May 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Latifah. Up next, I'd like to introduce Humberto Martin with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice.
Hello, everybody. My name is Humberto Martin. I'm with the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice. We are a grassroots organization fighting for justice for the people whose lives were stolen by police in the Twin Cities. Originally formed in 2015 after the murder of Jamar Clark and the 18-day occupation of the 4th Precinct, our work had primarily focused on justice for Jamar Clark and his family. However, in the nearly 9 years since, our scope of work has grown to extend our solidarity to everyone who's fighting for the right to self-determination and for all injustices here in the US and abroad. I've been asked to talk particularly about the solidarity between the Black liberation movement here in the US and the liberation movement in Palestine, the Palestine liberation movement. That informs our work. This solidarity that stems at least as far back in history as 1967 in what is referred to as the 67 War, a military assault carried out by the Israeli forces on Palestine, resulting in the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, as well as the Syrian Golan Heights. At this time, the same time, the Black Power movement was rising out of the broader Black freedom movement in the US. From these movements, organizations like the Black Panther Party and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or the SNCC, were formed. In response to the 67 War, seeing the brutal military occupation of the West Bank and the seizure of Gaza, the SNCC wrote a newsletter that articulated an understanding of the June 67 War as a war of colonial occupation and identified Palestinians as part of the global anti-colonial, anti-imperialist struggle. The Black Panther Party also supported the Palestinian cause regarding African Americans as an internally colonized people and considered both Black Americans and Palestinians to be the third world peoples oppressed by colonialism and imperialism, even developing relations with the Palestinian liberation occupation. It was also activists like Nelson Mandela speaking to the similarities between the Israeli apartheid state and the South African apartheid that was instrumental in raising the general level of consciousness about Palestine and the Black community here in the US and solidifying the solidarity between them. This history of solidarity was seen most recently in 2020 during the uprising here in the US in response to the brutal murder of George Floyd, a murder that drew clear, concrete lines between the struggle of liberation here in Palestine. For example, during the uprising, US police fired rubber-coated bullets, tear gas canisters, pepper spray, and stun grenades at protesters. It was the Palestinians that shared tips on social media on how to best deal with the assaults. The tactics used by Israeli forces to terrorize occupied Palestinian territories under the guise of security operations were the same tactics taught to US law enforcement delegates since September 11. Tactics such as the one used in the murder of George Floyd. Gang databases, like the one Chicago's Civilian Office of Police Accountability got rid of last year, that's right, are identical to the Shin Bet's list, a list that Palestinians who are arbitrarily defined as security threats get put on. In Atlanta, a militarized police training center known as Cop City, which is a near replica of Israeli's training facility, uses surveillance systems developed by Elbit System, the very same company that helps maintain the Iron Dome. These are but a few examples of the common struggle for liberation that unites Black and brown people. And so it is in the spirit of unity in a common struggle for the right of self-determination that TCC4J organized a pro-Palestine and Black Lives Matter car caravan and rally on January 13th, commemorating Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Over 250 people gathered in the parking lot to decorate their cars with demands of justice and slogans of solidarity before driving through the streets of St. Paul. After arriving at the Capitol, we heard coalition members speak about the connection between the violence and tactics used by US police and the IOF. TCC4J also organized a Palestinian and Black liberation teach-in to over 150 people. A teach-in where coalition members gave a historical account, far more in-depth than I have today, of the link between the Black liberation struggle and the Palestinian struggle for liberation that recognizes that these struggles are against a colonial project that started well before October 7th. So here in the Twin Cities, our struggle for self-determination comes in the form of community control of the police, a concept originally from the Reconstruction era and revived by the Black Panthers in the 60s, is couched in the logic of self-determination and people's right to have control over the institutes that shape their lives. TCC4J has been working for nearly 2 years to gather enough signatures to get a measure on the ballot that would radically change the city's charter, completely stripping the mayor of all power over the Minneapolis Police Department and putting that power in the hands of an all-elected civilian police accountability commission. May 1st is this year's deadline to get this measure on the ballot in November, and we are confident that we'll have enough signatures to do just that. So if you happen to live in Minneapolis, we ask that you support this initiative, sign our petition today. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to questions at this time. We have about 10 minutes to do some Q&A before we break for fasting. Does anyone have any questions for this lovely group of people? Yes, I see your hand.
Anthony says that's a great question, first of all. The question is, do we have one central campaign that we're all working on as a coalition, or are we working on our own different campaigns and we just sort of bring them to the coalition? And the answer is both. The anti-war committee before October 7th was already working to try to get the state of Minnesota to divest. And if you notice when Yasmin talked about the points of unity, that campaign is one of the points of unity for the coalition. So the coalition has been working on that in addition to the anti-war committee. But then, for example, like the students who organized and just got this ballot initiative at their campus, those of us who are not University of Minnesota students could not vote on that, which is unfortunate. But we did support and promote that campaign as well on social media. So both is the answer for that.
We have a mic going around, so Wyatt's going to pass.
I had a question just about the student organizing. Currently, we work with a student group on Morgan State University. They just did an action they had a job fair, Lockheed Martin and all these companies were there. They disguised, they covered themselves up, but they had signs that said, Morgan is complicit. They have, a few of them have been sent letters saying that they might get suspended and things like that. In terms of dealing with those kind of pressures, because obviously we're going to be supporting them, but we have kind of pushed them to make it public, right? Force them to say why they're suspending you, force them to call it out so that we can create a campaign around that. But I'm just wondering, what does the support look like for you with the organizations within the coalition, with your student group, and what are some things you would recommend as supportive?
That is a great question. Thank you. I guess I'll just start by saying the coalition has been enormously supportive of all of the political repression that students have faced on campus. And I guess I would just answer that question more broadly with what SDS's usual response is to political repression. It is to be public about it, and it is to speak out and talk to media, write your own articles, make your voice heard, create a campaign, create a political campaign that has other organizations that support it, because that is the best way that we have found to meet our demands. For example, like I mentioned the Tampa 5, that is like a very great concrete example of this. So that was 5 student protesters that were arrested in Tampa protesting against the Ron DeSantis administration. And they were facing 10 years in jail. And we, SDS chapters all across the country, participated in campaigns, and not only just SDS, but like here in Minneapolis, like many of the organizations that are in the Free Palestine Coalition also helped us with that campaign to free the Tampa 5. And it was because of that grassroots work and all of the people speaking out that the charges were eventually dropped. And I know like the anti-war movement here in Minneapolis has also faced a lot of political repression. Meredith herself has had the FBI knock on her door. And again, our response to that is to hold press conferences and be very public. So that's the advice that I would give.
Any more questions? Oh, right here.
My question's more about like labor organizing. So we're coming from DMV, Baltimore area, and a lot of the workers some have been sympathetic to the cause of Palestine, and others not so much. And I'm wondering what your experience here has been with that. And then for those that aren't already supportive of Palestine, how do you kind of like get them there? Apart from, getting them to understand like your wages are being stolen to go and bomb, people in Palestine. Like, I'm kind of wondering how that's been working for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think, so I talked about in my speech about us building like this strike vote and this contract campaign that we had, which was really, really militant. And to be clear, like the space that we were in, like a year and a half ago, the workplace was not militant. Like we built the militancy, we organized it, through like really, really relentless organizing. And I say all that to say that like, if we hadn't done that, and if we hadn't built up that power and we hadn't built up that trust, I don't think we would be at where we're at now, where we have, 80-ish of the like 160 union workers in that shop openly, like wearing these buttons to the point to where like people are leaving comments and saying like, I was really happy to see that there are workers wearing these buttons, right? And so, like, when I talk about, like, planting seeds, like, that's what this is. Like, as much as, like, we want it to be, like, boom, we're there, that's not how organizing works. And so, like, we had to build it, right? And, like, we still have so much to build. But, like, I work in a grocery store, so for us, it's, like, engaging people with, like, hey, like, we actually just discovered that we carry, like, 5 products that are products of Israel that we didn't know about, right? And, like, planting those seeds and talking to people about, like, hey, did you know this? And then, like, realizing that, like, okay, this is happening in your workplace. And where you work, that's going to be something different, right? So I would say, like, really, it's, like, building these relationships, like, specifically with, like, people that aren't necessarily your friends, right? Because, like, that's labor organizing, is, like, building relationships, even with the people that you might not be friends with outside of the space. Like, you have to build trust with them. And when people trust you, like, they're willing to listen, right? So I think that's what I would say to that.
Great. We are going to wrap up. I just want to give a huge thank you to our panelists for being incredible tonight. And thank you all for listening. Just a few housekeeping things. We are going to break, and we have light refreshments for folks, and we kindly ask that you allow those that were fasting to be able to get in the line first. And then please stick around. There'll be the yellow drums that are performing. They're incredible drummers. Our own very own Meredith has performed, and I've seen her. She's not performing today, but I've seen her perform with the yellow drums, and they're absolutely incredible. So stick around, enjoy the performance, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. First of all, as was mentioned that, for the comrades breaking fast, that there is some food out there. And tomorrow we're going to start at 9:30. It's early. And we have an agenda, an important agenda, a tight agenda. We'll try to keep the agenda moving so that we can get everything in. But there'll be series of workshops that will also take place throughout the conference, which will be smaller groups of people in 4 different areas at a time around here, where there'll be a lot more ability for having conversation and discussion on a number of topics, because although we all know that Palestine is the center of world politics right now, there are anti-imperialist struggles that we need to relate to and connect to that struggle all over the world. So there will be discussions on Latin America, on NATO, on the pivot to Asia, and what's going on towards China and other things. It's very important for us to make those connections, so I hope you'll be on time tomorrow and see that. Additionally, we're going to have some good, important speakers tomorrow. We will have actually 2 ambassadors speaking tomorrow from areas of the world that are affected by anti-imperialist struggles and are affected by imperialism. We will have the ambassador from Nicaragua, and we will have an ambassador from the Sahel area of Africa, which is fighting an independence struggle. So I hope you'll be here to hear these people and to participate throughout this weekend. There'll also be some skills workshops, and on Saturday night, there will be a youth gathering, because that is who's going to move our movement forward, and I hope you all participate in that. Additionally, we have some really great volunteer people who are live streaming this, and I'll give you the details tomorrow on where it's being live streamed so that you can share it on your social media platform so more people can see what's going on here, because this is what is important this weekend going on in this country. Thank you very much for all being here.